Hey everybody, Josh Hannabury here, Truck Focus Podcast. First off, I hope you're having a really good day. I'm super excited to announce a new series called Industry Specifics and How To. So, what that means is I'm trying to focus with my industry experts to create an album of different challenges that industry face, different things that maybe people first starting out aren't exactly sure how to do or what to do when they first out the gate. So someone's never owned a truck before. What do we do if it's the first time over the road? What things can they prepare for? So today I'm just going to quickly talk about flat deck and the flat deck division theory, different things that you can get excited about, but also things that you really need to monitor, pay attention to, and prepare for if this is the first time out your gate or out the gate. So I'm super excited. Thanks so much for being here today. It's just myself, no guests, keeping it solo. And yeah, we're just going to dive right in. So, thinking about big picture, you as a person, you as a small enterprise, you're thinking, you know what? I'm going to get into the trucking industry and I'm going to start with a flat deck division. So, really, you really need to think about is who's your customer base. So there's tons of different avenues in the flat deck division. You could be talking about moving automotive, just crushed cars to vehicles that people are going to be hauling, to construction equipment, heavy equipment materials, so drywall, lumber. You could be doing agricultural stuff, so a lot of hay is moved on flat deck. That's super important. And then, yeah, there's so many different offshoots that you can go. So asking yourself, what is it that I want to haul? Where's a good market? Where's some good revenue? In my experience, I come from the equipment world. There's really good opportunity to haul equipment on flat decks because you can just back up to a loading dock, get loaded, either yourself or someone else is going to load you. You're obviously responsible to tie it down, and away you go. So a lot of logistics companies are looking for flat deck haulers, especially in Western Canada, Eastern Canada, cross border. It's a pretty good market. So that's definitely something to consider. But when you're thinking about, again, when you're first starting out, you always want to know who's my target audience? What customers do I want? So that way you know that you're obtaining the right thing. Next, where do I want to travel? So there's a big difference between staying in the province. So I'm in Calgary, Alberta. So there's a big difference when you just want to stay in Alberta compared to going even from Alberta to BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, across the country or into the States. So there's different authorities that you'll have to obtain. It depends on how you're registering your company. You're either a provincial carrier or you can be a federal carrier. So that's really important to remember because there's a lot of different legislation. So rules, regulations that you have to follow depending on the type of carrier you set up yourself to be. If you're doing multi-province, so you're a federal carrier, you have to think about things like cross-border permits or IFTA and prorate, fuel, taxes, lots of different stuff. So just keeping that in mind when you're first starting out, who's the customer that you want to serve and where do you want to travel? Because if, again, you want to be just a provincial carrier, there's different requirements. There's still a lot to it, but it's not as much, I'd say, as when you're a federal carrier, because then you have to consider every province or every state that you're entering in. You have to make sure that you're monitoring things properly, such as fuel, hours of service. There's some just differences that really starting out, a lot of people don't realize. And that's, again, the purpose of this. So once you realize customer, where you want to go, the next is what kind of vehicle do you want to drive? So if you can think for a second, if you had unlimited resources, so tractors like new and used are fairly expensive, but it's a great investment. You're looking at, depending on what you're buying, if you're going new, 160 grand to 220 grand for an over the road, kind of depending on the spec. Some things to really consider, and again, I'm going to have different industry experts on talking about all of this stuff, but things to consider when you're first buying your first power unit. So if we identify as a semi or a tractor, is what do you want? Not just price. Price is super important. I get that. But what is it that you as a person want? Because you're going to be spending potentially a lot of time behind the seat, or one day you're going to hire someone that's going to spend a lot of time behind the seat or on the seat, behind the wheel. You want to make sure that you're comfortable, that you feel safe, that you feel in control. Some people love an 18 speed. Some people want an automatic, a 12-speed automatic. So that's important. The ergonomics in your seat. So different controls to make sure that you're sitting properly. So when you're cruising down the road, depending on what you have, you're comfortable, your mirror positions, what's rattling in the box, what's rattling in the sleeper. So depending if you have a day cab or if you have a bunk, different things to consider, different, obviously, wheelbases longer. So when you're turning, if you're navigating more in the city, maybe you're not going to consider a 240 wheelbase, 240-inch wheelbase, but you're going to think of something a little smaller. So that's really important to think, what do I want? I'm a huge international fan. I love the LTs. I definitely love the Lone Stars, and the new HXs that have come out are awesome too. But again, it depends on what you want. If you're just a regional hauler and you're going to be on dirt, if you're going to be in mud as well on highway, highly recommend the HX. If you're doing stuff a little more over the road, long distance, the LT and the Lone Star are definitely great options too. But again, that's your decision. What do you want to drive? You want to be proud of what you're operating, but you also want to make sure that whoever you're buying it from, they're giving you a fair price. They're giving you great service, not just at the time of pre-sale, not just to the point where you sign a contract, take the keys, or I guess your bill of sale and take the keys, but after the fact. That's what's most important. And that's one thing that I respect most about one of my really good friends, that he'll be on a different episode of the Truck Focus podcast, is he is an exceptional after the purchase salesperson, because he genuinely cares about your success. And that to me is super important. So those are some things to consider. Are you going to lease? Are you going to buy outright if you have the money? Are you going to get a loan from the bank? All sorts of different things to consider depending on your financial situation. So that's really important. But out the gate, again, who's your customer? Where are you going to travel, and what are you going to drive? What do you want to operate in pride and in comfort? So that way you know that you're definitely the captain of your ship. The next, being in the flat deck division, is identifying what type of trailer do you want. So it's crazy when you think about the amount of equipment out there, but there's so many different setups of trailers. It's mind-boggling. So when if you're Googling, or if you're an auto trader, or if you talk to somebody that knew somebody that knew somebody, there's so much. So a lot of it is determined off of what you feel you're going to offer for your customers based off of the products that they own. That's how I started out. So we had a Tridem, so a 3-axle, it was a 9.5 wide, 53-foot traveling axle. So the 3 axles underneath slid, and then it progressed. So that way you could load, like the deck would touch the ground, so you could load different things up top. That was a great choice for the operations that we had. Flat deck could be just simply that. It could be 2 or 3 axles. 1 axle is a little light, in my opinion, on the back, but you could have a different combination of, if it's a 40-foot, 48-foot, 53-foot, you could do 40 feet and then a step deck. That's always an opportunity. There's things called low boys, more so meant for the equipment space. But yeah, there's a lot of different options of trailers, all depending again on what do you want to do, where do you want to go, what customers are you going to serve, because that's what matters most. Price, they definitely vary. Some of them have hydraulic systems, some of them carry extra just supplies, and some of them are pretty bare bones. So that's definitely a decision that you're going to have to make. But keeping in mind that you don't have to go to the extreme on your purchase. It doesn't have to be galvanized. You don't have to have the shiniest rims. You just want to make sure it's safe and it can do the job that you need it to do. So that's super important. So after you identify the trailer, it's super important to think about, okay, what do you as a professional, what do I need? So to operate a commercial vehicle, that's a tractor trailer, so air to air, and certain overweights, depending on where you go, you're going to either need a class A with air or a class 1 with air. So in Alberta, it's a class 1 with air. So you're going to need your driver's license. So depending on the province, there's something called MELT. So mandatory entry-level driver training that you're going to need to go through. Each province that obtained, or I guess enforces MELT, put it into their provincial legislation. It's a different time. So it could be 130 hours upwards to, I believe it's 150 hours now in BC, just to get the basic training. That's just basic. Then you go for your road test, you obtain your class 1, then you're able to actually drive this thing. But you want to make sure when you're driving or where you're driving, you feel competent that you can do it. So driving in Calgary and going to, say, Winnipeg is a very different drive than going from Calgary to Vancouver. Different terrain, you're in the Rockies compared to the fields. So really keep that in mind. What additional training can you get to make sure that you're comfortable behind the wheel? It's your investment, it's your customer's product, there's trust, there's insurances in place that we're going to talk about in a moment, but all of that is super important. So making sure that you're not just getting your license and thinking, yes, I got this. It's getting your license and making sure that you're adequately trained and you feel confident that you can do the job that you need to get done to ensure that your life is safe, passengers are safe, public in general is safe, And then obviously the road, the equipment, all that good stuff is safe. So that's super important. So now that we have that all there, you're going to pick up your truck. Perfect. Before you leave the dealership, you got to do something called a pre-trip inspection. So most tractors, they're registered over a certain weight. So depending where you are is determining on based off of when a pre-trip is required and documented. So again, it just depends on where you are. So again, well, a lot of it just depends on where you are. So there's in Canada, we identify National Safety Code, and there's Schedule 13 or National Safety Code 13, Center 13, Schedule 1, Part 2 is definitely where you need to go. You need to make sure that you're looking and inspecting for all of those things on your power unit before you leave the dealership to ensure that the vehicle is safe. You're going to make sure that you have the right documents in place. So you're going to need to obviously have your registration. And when you're looking at your registration, it's super important to identify that, yes, this is the VIN of the vehicle. Yes, the license plates match the physical license plates I put on the vehicle, that the company name is accurate. But most of all, the gross vehicle weight rating, your GVWR, is accurate. So again, depending on what you're hauling, is depending on the weight that you need to register that vehicle to legally be able to haul. Super important you get that right, because if you don't, it can be fairly expensive. In the event you're ever pulled over by law enforcement, I've seen it where a tractor trailer should be doing 46,500. So 46,500 kilograms is what it should be registered for. And it was only registered for about 12,900. And that was just because it was brought up from the States and then no one decided to switch it. They forgot. Oops, was never caught on a pre-trip until I caught it. So really important to remember that you got to make sure that GVWR is correct. So once you know that your registration, everything is good, insurance. So we're going to have an insurance specialist actually being recorded this upcoming weekend on the podcast, which is super exciting. I'm really excited to introduce everyone to my good friend Horace, who's the account executive with Liable Insurance Group. Great guy, exceptional organization, but you got to make sure that your equipment is insured properly to legally be on the roadway, but also the cargo that you're hauling. So if you had, say, a 53-foot flat deck, for example, and you went all crazy and you had 4 Ferraris on there, say that's what, $1.5 million, maybe $2 million, depending, I guess, on the car. You got to make sure that you have insurance to cover that in the event of an accident, plus everything else. So that's just one extreme, but you have to make sure you're protected for. You got to make sure that the power unit and trailer have a CVIP inspection. So CVIP is a commercial vehicle inspection program. So again, depending on where you are, it determines the length of time that an inspection is valid for, as well as the GVWR required. So you got to make sure that you have those documents in place. Backtrack a little bit. Pre-trip is required on the trailer first, or before it's on the road, but that's once you actually go to the dealer to get your trailer too. So those are important. Making sure if you have any permits. So permits are pretty popular, especially when you go across the country, into the States, that kind of stuff. Different areas have different needs for permits. So permits now, highly recommend you speak to a girl named Paige, who's the owner. She's awesome, super knowledgeable. And yeah, just making sure if in the event you ever need a permit that you're covered on that. That's super important. You obviously have your trip inspection report. You're gonna have your daily logbook. So depending, again, if you're federal, provincial, there's different requirements on what you're logging and different rules you have to follow. But at the end of the day, that's super important. And then anything else documentation-wise that you need for your business, you need your NSC safety fitness certificate. It needs to be in good standing order. So it's either going to be unconditional satisfactory, conditional satisfactory. Starting out, hopefully you're not in a monitoring phase. That's not necessarily the case. So those are some really important things to really think about. And then once you get to the customer, you picked up your equipment, everything's good, you arrive, and they want you to load, say it's a big, I don't know, a big forklift, just for an example. They're thinking, you know what, I can put that big forklift on. You need to make sure that you're placing that forklift in such a way that you're not overweight, that the manufacturer believes that, yes, your trailer can handle it. You've registered your registration for enough to actually handle that much weight of this forklift, but also where you're placing it doesn't accidentally put your axles overweight. So those are really important. So there's different types of forklifts in the world. So I'm going to talk about a forward reach called telehandler forklift. So I think the 1054 weighs around 32,000 pounds, give or take. You load this thing on and you put it all the way. So you have your tractor, you have your trailer. If you load it all the way to the front and you sit right where your fifth wheel connects to the kingpin, boom, that's where you're putting this heavy machine. Chances are you're going to be overweight on your drive axle. So obviously you have your steers on the tractor, you have your tandem axle, most likely you're not doing tridem on your tractor. So those are your drive axles, and then you have your trailer axles. So all of those axles have certain weight limits. So you got to make sure that at no point you ever exceed those axle limits for where you're loading for each province or state you're driving through to your final destination. And yes, a lot of these places have different weight allowances on purpose. It's for infrastructure, it's for conditions of roads, it's for your own safety to ensure that you can stop. There's lots of reasons for axles, manufacturer obviously as well. So making sure that you place equipment, placing hay, agricultural goods, crush cars, whatever you're hauling in the right spot. So that way, when you actually have to scale it, you know that you're legal. So again, you place the telehandler too far forward, chances are you're going to be over on your drives. But what if you promise that customer that you can take two of those things? Okay, then you have the first, then you load the second, possibly that you're actually over on all axle groups now. So then you kind of look like a bad person because you told this customer, yes, absolutely, I can do this. Now you're having to go back on your word. It doesn't work out that well in business. So you want to make sure ahead of time you understand what you can legally load for a load pattern on your piece of equipment to ensure that, yes, I'm safe, I'm legal, I'm in control, and everything is good. So say you put the telehandler more in the middle, you only promise the one, that's what your contract says, your bill of lading says. You put it in the middle, it's legal. Next, what you have to do is called cargo securement. So you got to secure that piece of equipment to the trailer with adequate, safe, good working order cargo securement equipment. It has to have a working load limit, some form of identification on the actual equipment itself. So if you're using chain and boomers, all pieces have to have a working load limit. If not, throw it out. Basically, at the end of the day, it's not perceived as anything's there. And please don't ever use, and I'm saying this because I see it on our highways still, don't use rope, don't use sheets tied up to tie things in place. Don't use bungee cords, even though I know we see bungee cords. Don't count on bungee cords as an actual cargo securement piece. Super, super important, because what will happen again, if law enforcement sees anything like that, it's just not there. It's an insecure load, place out of service, really expensive fine. And at the end of the day, you're putting your life and other people's life at risk for using inadequate tools. So that's super important. Make sure you're using proper cargo securement. Nothing can leak, blow off, move, shift, fall, nothing once it's on your equipment. So when you're hauling flat deck, whatever you put on there, it doesn't matter if it's sand, if it's little pebbles that came. So say the telehandler was in a field, it was a little muddy, and they drove it onto a loading ramp and then they put it onto your trailer. Pretty common. You got to make sure all of that mud and dirt and rocks are not on that trailer before you leave. Because if anything can fly off, it can be very dangerous for other motorists, obviously, but it's very expensive in the time of an inspection where you can be placed out of service for an insecure load just because you didn't spend the 10, 20 minutes to sweep off the deck. So it's super important. At the end of the day, the objective of being in business is to satisfy customers as safely as you can, make a lot of money in the process, and love what you do. Those are the big three for me. So making sure that, again, going into this is for anyone out there that wants to become an owner operator. They want to get on somewhere and they're going to drive their own tractor. They're going to pick a destination or a region that they're going to cover, what type of customer base that you're going to have, what type of trailers are you going to own, what type of cargo securement equipment you need, patterns of placement to ensure you're never overweight. You need to have proper documentation in the truck with the trailer, bill of ladings, lots of other stuff that we'll be talking about in a later time. But yeah, I hope you really found this video very useful on a how-to series for industry specific, different sectors that we're going to continue to dive in if it's myself with an industry expert. But again, it's all to serve our industry to create that pivotal impact. So everyone that's been supporting the Truck Focus podcast since the beginning, thank you so much. If this is your first time ever watching anything that we produce, thank you. I really hope you found today to be valuable. As always, I ask, if you're watching this on YouTube, especially, I ask that you subscribe. Just press that little red button, boom, because the greater the following, the greater the impact. And if you're listening to this in a different platform, please like, share. If there's ever a question, ever a need that you want answered, please send me an email. It's just pvtlindustry@gmail.com. And yeah, you can always obviously tag on here, send a message directly on social media, hop to our website, which is pvtlcompliance.com, and then just send us a notification through the contact us. While you're on our website, I highly recommend checking out our strategic partners. We have some really good relationships in place with other industry experts that are doing a fantastic job serving our industry. We offer things like online training, in-person training. We work really closely with an expert compliance organization. So if you ever need anything like that, let us know. Accident evaluations, lots of good stuff to serving our industry. And again, just thank you so much for checking in. I really appreciate all of your time, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Thanks again. Take care.